Welcome to another episode of the Commander Experience podcast. I'm Brian,
I'm Jacob.
and in today's episode, we're asking a very simple question. Are board wipes actually bad in Commander? We'll look at when they help, when they hurt, and how they impact the flow of a Bracket 4 game.
Yeah, we'll share some examples from our own games and maybe also look into maybe some of the feelings there is around ball wipes because I think that's actually important in this conversation.
So let's start out with saying, well, maybe a little personal statement. As some of the viewers may know if they've seen some of our earlier episodes, especially Rethinking Interaction and Board Wipes episode, they know that I myself have taken out all the board wipes from my decks because I do feel like they are hurting my game more than they are helping. I'm not saying that there's not a place for a board wipe in the game. I've just made the choice that I do think they overall hurt my game more than they are helping, and that's why I've removed my board wipes. But I haven't removed interaction in general. I've removed my board wipes and I've added one extra spot removal or counter spell, something that does something similar. I've not just put in more gas or something like that. I do still think it's necessary to remove my opponent's creatures and stuff like that. But opposite the board wipes, you have a chance with instant speed removal to stop a combo, and I do think that matters more than in doing a board wipe, because I also think that when you do a board wipe, let's say you remove, let's just say 6 creatures. Of those 6 creatures, how many of them were actually a problem? Are you casting the board wipes to remove 2 problem pieces? Are they all 6 a problem piece, or where are we at? And I do think that if you're only removing 1 to 2 problem pieces out of 6, then it's almost doing the same thing as a spot removal. And then there's also all the other questions surrounding by, are they hurting you the most? Yes, Drannith Magistrate might be an issue, but are you the one that suffers most from this? And do you really need a board wipe to remove it? But we will dig a little bit deeper into this conversation before I'm rambling away. What do you think about the board wipe conversation, Jacob?
I think I'm not on the other side because I definitely began removing more and more board wipes, but I'm still playing some. And I think especially in tutor heavy decks, I have a tendency to play some because I feel like I can have one in the deck, so like Toxic Deluge, which I see as the best one. Have that, and if I have Vampiric Tutor, Demonic Tutor, whatever, 5, 8 cards that can find that card, then it will be the target in some situation, and I like to have the versatility of being able to tutor it. I will say, after we have talked about it a lot in the last half year, after we've talked about it a lot, I have also looked into it more in our games, and I would say most of the times where I actually tutor Toxic Deluge, yes, it feels good to cast it, but I'm probably not winning that game. So that's an interesting thing, but I will say that it feels like when I cast it that my win percentage or chance to win the games goes up, but the problem is it also goes up for 2 other opponents and down for the one that had all the things in play. So yeah, that's my stance currently on board wipes and my quick thoughts.
Yeah, because you almost answered the question before I asked it, because that was going to be my next question. How often do you actually tutor for Toxic Deluge? Because I know when you're playing that you're all about the value pieces or the protection. I do think that 9 out of 10 times you're either finding something like a Ristic Study or a Fierce Guardianship. So
yeah,
how often do you actually tutor for Toxic Deluge, do you think? If you have to put a number on it in let's say, out of 20 tutors, how many of them are finding a board wipe?
Yeah, I'm actually not sure. I don't know if it's a useful stat, but I think I played like 250 games this year, and I think I have tutored for it 5 times around that, and all those 5 times it didn't feel great most of the time. As also on top of that, so yeah.
But one could argue that a card necessarily doesn't have to feel good in order for it to be good. Because yes, a board wipe is probably never a place you want to be unless you're playing a Saurius Control in in standard or something like that. But it can be necessary, I think, in some games, and that's why I always say that. Of course, there's a place for a board wipe in many games, but are they helping you or are they hurting you? And I do think that even when you wipe the board and you're no longer behind, as you said, it doesn't mean that you're now in charge of that game.
No, it's more like, and that's why I'm still playing it a bit, is it's more like if someone has a giant board and is basically unstoppable, he's going to win on his turn. I feel like I have a 0% chance of winning at that point. Let's just say I have 15 because stuff can happen. And then I play my board wipe and my chance go from 15% to 20%. I have in some ways gained a 5% win chance, but the two guys next to me has also gained 5 and 5, and they go before me. So that's the big problem, is that I have kind of given away a 10% win rate to people that have their turn before I have my turn.
And it also raises the question where you're having your Toxic Delusion hand and you have the option of casting it. But if you didn't have the Toxic Delusion in your deck and you had, let's say, a Dismember instead of the Toxic Delusion in your deck now you have the Dismember in hand. Is that Dismember solving the same issue? And now you have 2 more mana for your turn? And you even have the option of casting at instant speed. I do think there's also those options where it's really only 1 or 2 pieces that are hurting you, a combo piece or whatever.
Yeah, I think a lot of the times, if the Toxic Deluge was, as I said, basically he would win if I didn't cast it, Dismember will probably do the same thing. I think where Toxic Deluge is different is that it kind of removes other people's value stuff. So because it gets all the other creatures, it does that as well. But how good is that? I wouldn't use a removal spell on it, so now I have used 2 extra mana on removing something I probably wouldn't remove, but it slows my opponents down, but it also slows me down. So yeah, I think the math is hard, and that's probably why it's hard for me to wrap my head around it.
And also, since we are playing in a private pod, we are 5 rotating players at this moment. We do have a tendency to see a lot of the same decks week in and week out. And when I'm sitting here thinking about it, I can't really think of that many decks where I'm thinking that it would probably be nice to have a board wipe against that deck. A few come to mind, of course. You have your derivative deck where every creature you have is untapping your 1 ring. So Boardwipe there is fantastic because it's not only the Ravi that's the issue in that deck.
Yeah.
There's also your Tayam deck where all of your pieces, because they have counters on it, are usually a problem. Removing Tayam is just not gonna cut it because if you replay him, you're back to square one. And there's also my Torsten deck, maybe, with the Hair Parents. When talking about board wipes against Torsten, it seems very obvious, but I was actually winning with that deck against a Massacre Worm just a few weeks back, where my whole board got Massacre Wormed and I lost a lot of life, and I just bounced back because it's so resilient, that deck. And I do think that Time have some of those same characteristics, because even if you wipe the board, Time can reanimate everything that goes into the graveyard, and you usually have some sort of setup where you can do that over and over again. I do know, of course, in Time, if you wipe the board, you need to gain all the counters back in order to get the ball rolling again, and that can be real difficult. But I'm just saying that even when you do board wipe, it's sometimes only a half measure, and I do think that's my biggest issue with the board wipes.
Yeah, and I think it's also like a byproduct of a lot of the good cards, at least at the current time, is not creatures. Because I will say, if we get hit by one of the better board wipes that basically wipes every permanent, non-land permanent, those feel like real devastating. Like, okay, now we're back in the Stone Ages, this hurts. But those are so much mana, so it's kind of different discussion. But yeah, I think it's also, yeah, as I said, the kind of cards that is being played, Ristic Study and Mana Rocks and Food Chain, Random Enchantments, whatever, that just not gets hit by this stuff is sometimes the biggest problem. And that's why I think at least Torsten's kind of doesn't care, because he can, if you get Massacre Worm and you have a Food Chain in play on your next turn, you can just try again. So yeah, that is probably one of the big reasons. The typing is not just creatures in Commander a lot of the time.
And I also think, and I think this is an important point in the whole board wipe conversation, that when we're talking about board wipes, we're talking about sorcery speed, and we are always saying that Cyclonic Rift is an exception to this rule. So what we're saying with that is that we think that Cyclonic Rift is the better of the board wipes because it's instant speed, and it not only removes creatures, it removes all permanents. But can you honestly say that you have seen 5 overloaded Cyclonic Rift in our private pod this year?
No.
So how good are board wipes?
That's the weird thing, because of course Esoteric Rift is good, but our games end before 7 mana. That's the weird part. I will say though, and that's why I wanted to include in the intro, the feeling part is that, to be very specific, basically in our last play session. So in our pod we have a Boardwipe enjoyer, and through the evening he cast a couple of Boardwipes. It's not really a specific thing he removed, but just through the games in the evening. And every time he cast one, it felt impactful, and it felt like it really did a difference. And of course it did for me, because I didn't pay the 4 mana to cast it. So I think that's why, at least the feeling, when I see a Boardwipe, it feels powerful, it does a lot of stuff, and I'm not sure I just don't want to be the one casting it, so that's the hard part. I think we talked about this before.
And that's what always makes me laugh when talking about board wipes. It always seems like there are two people that are really sad about a board wipe, and there are two people that are really happy about it. The two people that are sad is the one casting it and the arch enemy that got the most stuff removed, and the other two opponents are just happy about it. I've sat in so many games where I didn't have a creature out and the board wipe was been cast, and I was just like, it's almost like having an instant speed board wipe that doesn't cost any mana in your deck, that doesn't even take out a place in your deck. A secret 101st card that just does everything for you. It seems so powerful to be one of the opponents that not get hurt by this, and one of your other opponents used resources and time to do so. And that's why I always get back to, are the board wipes you have in your deck hurting you more than they are helping you? And if that's the case, maybe every player should look to remove them from their decks. But if they're helping you more than they're hurting you, and there are definitely commanders that are evolved around this strategy, and that's another conversation. But again, if they're helping you more than they're hurting you, then of course they have a place in your deck. But I do think that is a question you need to ask for every single deck in your possession. After we recorded this episode, we all of a sudden remember that we didn't record part of the episode. So that is why I'm sitting here in other clothes, and Jacob will not be here for this part of it. But I found it both necessary to do it because I think it's on theme to talk about the card I wanted to talk about originally, and that is Calling Ritual. And this is, of course, a board wipe that is fitting for this episode, but I also think it's one of the few cards that you can actually play in Bracket 4 Commander. And while it's a board wipe that gets better and better the higher the power level you play due to all the fast mana rocks, it is also just one of the few that even in lower brackets, it will still give you a discount of at least 2 mana, I think. You will always hit 2 permanents, and if you're not, then you're not casting it at all. And in Bracket 4 especially, you will have so many games where people have rammed out Mana Vaults, Mox Diamond, Soul Ring. And this is just the situation you would like to find yourself in, where you can just reset the board for your advantage, gain a lot of mana, meaning that Calling Ritual itself will probably even gain your mana. You cast it for 4 and maybe you get 6 or even 8 mana back. So you will not be waiting to rebuild on your next turn. You can rebuild immediately, and that's why I think the Calling Ritual is such a great board wiping commander, and I would love to see more of these spells. So Calling Ritual gets a thumbs up on the board wipe in my opinion, and I'm pretty sure that Jacob feels the same way. Now let's get back to the episode.
An interesting thought experiment is what does a board wipe need to do to be playable? How good does it need to be to cast it? Let's just say it's a creature board wipe, so not go overboard and say it removes everything, because then I think 4 mana is probably fine and we can pretty quickly end this discussion. But a board wipe that just removes creatures, and I'm talking all creatures your own, what should it even cost? 2 mana? And here I'm not talking about, of course, it's powerful, broken stuff. But if you wanted to cast a board wipe, what should it cost?
I don't think you can make board wipes any cheaper, because the effect is still powerful. A board wipe effect is powerful. And that's why we're having this conversation, because if the board wipe was not powerful, it was just why playing them. But board wipes are powerful, but because they're so expensive, that is why they are probably unplayable in Bracket 4. And that's the question, because if they're costing 2 mana, yes, I'm running board wipes.
Yeah.
So I don't think you can do that. What I do think is that board wipes need to contribute in some other way, and that's why a Cyclonic Rift is of course still good, because you do have the option of just casting it for 2 mana, bounce one thing that can be a combo piece. It's so flexible, and that's why Cyclonic Rift is probably always correct to put in your deck. But in other decks that can fit it, I actually cast one yesterday. I cast a Boardwipe. I'm saying I'm not running any, and here I'm saying I cast a Boardwipe yesterday. But that was an Apex Devastator into a Ruinous Ultimatum, and that Boardwipe ended the game. So,
Yeah.
and that's what I said before. If you have decks that can fit Boardwipes or is Boardwipe centric in some way, then of course I do think it's a powerful effect.
Yeah, so maybe the solution to my question, how good it needs to be, is maybe just that they need to print more of those one-sided board wipes, but are more specific. Like, I can't remember the names, but some of the one that destroys all creatures that is tapped or untapped, or destroy all creatures with counters and stuff like that. Maybe those kind of board wipes is the one we need to see more of.
I do think I think the way to make Boardwipes viable in Commander would be to print more one-sided Boardwipes, where you're not hurt by the Boardwipe yourself. So when you're casting a Boardwipe, let's say 5 mana, now you have all your stuff. Yes, you might have to pass the turn after casting the Boardwipe and not doing anything else, but now you don't have to rebuild yourself. So when it gets round to you, maybe you're still in front, and now it's viable to cast those Boardwipes. And I've talked a bit about this card with you earlier, and I do think, even though it costs 8 mana, I do think that Call Forth the Tempest is one of the new Boardwipes that are perhaps even overlooked. And that's because it costs 8 mana, but most of the time, because it has Cascade, you're kind of getting the value back. You can even get the whole 8 mana back if you're lucky, but you're getting it back in some way. And let's say in worst case scenario, you only get a worth of 4 CMC in total. Now you're still casting a Boardwipe for 4 mana, which is the average cost for a Boardwipe, but it's also one-sided.
Yeah.
So I do think that if they have to print Boardwipes that are viable in Commander, they have to go more in that direction, where it's one-sided, maybe a little bit more expensive, but you don't get hurt by it.
Yeah, I think that is probably the solution, that it needs to be one-sided for it even being thought about.
And that's why Ruinous Ultimatum is such a powerhouse when we're talking Boardwipes. I think if Mardu is not really my colors, but I think if I was building decks in those colors, I would always just include Ruinous Ultimatum, even though I have the opinion of not running Boardwipes, because it's one-sided, and in some cases it's just a win con on itself.
Yeah, I definitely think there is. So you could make a deck that was just, let's ramp all we can and then just cast a Ruinous Ultimatum, and we probably have the game in the bag.
Maybe that's my next deck. But yeah. But we've been talking about this, as you said, for the last 6 months or so. We also made the episode where we covered it just a little bit with rethinking interaction and Boardwipes. But now a little bit of time has gone by. Have you noticed playing against me, knowing that I don't run any Boardwipes? Do you sit across from me and thinking, well, I can just overcommit? I know at least Brian is not running any Boardwipes. Is it helping you in any way? Do you think it's easier to play against my decks, or what is your experience across from the table, where you know you have at least one opponent that is not running any Boardwipes?
I think at least, and that's maybe very visible in my Commander choices recently and my way of building decks, that has changed a bit. For a long time, I never played Mana Dogs or stuff like that, because I felt like they would just get swept with the rest and I would get set so far behind. And recently, the Revi has a lot of Mana Dogs, and my Neo Kenrith deck has a lot of Mana Dogs, so I wouldn't say that the games have changed a lot, but I will say that the way I'm building decks have changed. So I'm more open to playing more creatures and not be so afraid of those things getting swept, and have more decks that commit to the board.
Yeah, because we still have one opponent in our pod that more than makes up for the lack of my Boardwipes. He's probably playing too many.
I would say, and that's very pod specific, I will say that our last play session felt a lot different than the 3 before that, where that player wasn't in our pod because he was on vacation. So it went from, I felt like I could just play whatever creature, didn't really matter. I could just have 20 creatures on the board. Some of them would get spot removed, but that's it. And last play session, I think there was like 4 or 5 Boardwipes. So definitely interesting that there is definitely some play around who you play against now, because we basically have one person that really goes hard on Boardwipes and no one else plays any or very little.
To be honest, I haven't missed them at all. I have not in one situation thought that I just wish I had a board wipe. Of course, if I really rack my brain, there's probably some situations where a board wipe would have fixed the issue. But then again, we are back to analyzing the game in total in order to know if it really helped or not, if that board wipe was available and had been cast. By how big a percentage does your own game changes get of casting that board wipe? Because that's always the question you have to answer if board wipes are good or not. That is, yes, they might feel good, but are you winning that game? Are you just helping one of your other two opponents even more to win their game?
Yeah.
And that's the question that is really hard to answer. The only way to do it is track all the games where you cast board wipes and take note if you're winning or not.
Yeah, and also as we are moving closer to, as we have talked about a lot in our episodes, winning faster. At this point, 4 mana is it's not winning the game, but it's setting up for winning the game probably most of the time. That 4 mana, and instead you're now kneecapping yourself and your opponents, maybe, but at least yourself. So now you have spent the turn that was the setup turn for winning, for kneecapping yourself, and now you need to rebuild on your next turn, and then maybe on the next turn after that you can win. And at that point, someone has probably drawn their whatever 2-card combo and won the game.
But where do you stand in all of this? You mentioned that since we began our conversation, that you may have started to maybe pull a few board wipes out of your decks. Are those specific kind of decks where you don't think board wipes are needed as much, or is it more random that this deck might need a little more gas and, well, I just might as well pull the board wipe? What kind of decks are you pulling the board wipes from?
Yeah, I think at this point it's mostly color based. It's kind of a boring answer, but the answer is basically I feel like it's so narrow what the good board wipes is. So if I'm not playing black for Toxic Deluge or blue for Cyclonic Rift, and I don't really play Cyclonic Rift in a lot of decks now because most of my kind of decks doesn't make that much mana, so I won't be able to cast it. So at this point it's basically Toxic Deluge. So if I play black and I feel like I'm not creature based, I will put a Toxic Deluge in, and that's probably it at this point. So maybe I'm not that much on the board wipe train as well.
But is it fair to say that, or let me ask this in another way, is this a case of old habits die hard from your case? Or is it still that you think that overall you still think that board wipes are the necessary evil and it's better to run at least one board wipe than replace it with a target removal?
I'm not sure. It could be old habits die hard, because I wouldn't put in a target removal spell that costs 3 mana. Like 3 mana is too much. So it is a high price to pay. It just feels like when you play, especially in black, when you have all the tutors, it feels like you have like more room for being like a toolboxy deck that can pull out different tools in different situations. But yeah, as I said, I haven't really tutored for it lately. I feel like when this talk started about a year ago or something like that, I feel like I still had a lot of games at that point where I actually tutored for Toxic Deluge and played them, and it felt good, and I feel like it had a place. And as I said, in the last half a year here, I probably haven't done that as much. So it might just be habits. And
you just built your new Kenrith deck and played it for the first time in our pod yesterday. How many board wipes are you running in that deck? Because that has access to 5 colors. I know that the deck itself is a bit creature-centric, but are you running Toxic Deluge?
No, 0. 0.
But okay, you could argue that it's because it's a creature-centric deck that you have taken that path.
Yeah, like a deck like Sir the Enchanter, I'll rebuild that recently. That deck I run Toxic Deluge and Cyclonic Rift, and I don't really play any creatures in that deck, so it feels a bit easier to do that, and it feels like it's still worth it. And it's also a deck where I draw a million cards, so it doesn't really feel too bad to draw Toxic Deluge. So,
and I also think it's fair to say that it is a bit part of the strategy, because that deck takes a bit longer to win.
Yeah, that's true.
So you kind of need to stall the game, and you're, like you said, you're not really running any creatures yourself. So if you're in a good place with your enchantments, it's just easy to board wipe and prolong the game that way. So I think in that case, it's more about it's on theme.
Yeah, true. So maybe the conclusion is, and I don't know if there's much more to talk about, but maybe the conclusion is that I kind of agree with you. If it's not on theme, don't run board wipes.
I also think that we're sitting here talking about Toxic Deluge and Cyclonic Rift, and not once have we mentioned Wrath of God or anything like that. So I think it kind of answers the questions if board wipes are good or not, because yes, we do have an opponent in our pod that are running more than average board wipes in his decks, but those are usually stacks / control-y decks. So it is on theme. It's not random that he has these board wipes in his decks.
That's true.
So, but I think we will leave that open-ended. What do you guys think? Do you think board wipes are a necessary evil or just game-slowing habits? Share your thoughts on our Discord server. You can find the link in the description from this episode. Thank you for tuning in, and we'll see you in the next one.
Thank you. See you next one.